Hi, this is Christopher Golden. I just want to post a video here because several people have been wondering about what exactly is the point of Falconet? What exactly are the motives and behind the design philosophy of this game? And that's a fair point. I think that I'm long overdue to post this video to discuss just what is the point of Falconet. So let's just take a few steps back and just discuss the inspiration for Falconet. And we do not believe that there's such a thing as a modern, well-designed game that is completely 100% original. We think that, the reason why games are so good today is because we stand on the shoulders of giants, meaning that we take things that have already been proven to work and either try to polish them even further or add a new spin on them or combine them with other proven gameplay elements that people enjoy to create an entirely new experience that ends up being extremely successful and very popular. With that said, the main inspiration for Falconet is actually not a twin-stick shooter. The design philosophy actually originated from a shoot 'em up from 1998, released in arcades and on the Sega Saturn. And before I reveal what this game is, I just want to take a moment just to talk about some history about shoot 'em ups, why they were popular back in the old days and why they're not popular today. The way that modern shooters play are pretty much the same that shooters played back in the 90s. It's not that much of a difference. Usually you have, a ship that has a weapon. Sometimes you'll have a special weapon like bombs or a special ability like shields or that sort of thing. But ultimately, shooters, are all pretty much the same. It's just about hold down the fire button and dodge everything. And a lot of people do find that still enjoyable, but the reality is that the vast majority of people find that to be too repetitive and too monotonous. As a result, it has become an obscure genre. However, I think that there is so much potential with the genre, and I feel that the ultimate evolution of the genre happened in 1998 with the release of a game called Radiant Silvergun. It has taken the genre and just turned it up to 11 and added so many new features that a lot of people would say that it is the best vertical shooter ever to exist. And that's really saying something because, well, I think it's one of the best games of all time, and I don't like vertical shooters. It turns out that it's not the genre that I disliked. It's the fact that the shoot 'em up genre has just not evolved to compete in the modern gaming scene like other genres have. If you were to take something like Donkey Kong, which is one of the earliest platformers, it was extremely successful for the time, but re-releasing a sort of a Donkey Kong clone in today's scene would not be very fruitful. It would be literally a waste of time and money, and that's because we're way beyond that. That game's a little too primitive for most people to get heavily invested in it. And this is exactly what happened with shoot 'em ups, except that unlike platformers where they have evolved, starting with Super Mario Brothers, that really showed what a platformer could be and would continue to elaborate with not just future Mario games, but you got the Sonic franchise, you got modern takes on platformers like Shovel Knight, for instance, that that are very well polished, very sophisticated, and have a lot of variety and just just extremely enjoyable and well-made games. This evolving, this evolution, or this keeping up to date with the times didn't really happen with vertical shooters or horizontal shooters. And because the way that modern shooters play are pretty much the same that shooters played back in the 90s. It's not that much of a difference. It basically takes the things of old shooters that are there to limit what the player can do to increase difficulty, but also decreases the fun factor. For instance, in a typical shoot 'em up, when you pick up a weapon, not only you would get a new weapon, but that weapon usually would replace your old weapon. So you would still be stuck with just one weapon and maybe some kind of special that you can use occasionally, like a bomb or shield or something like that. And even though some people will say that, shooters have evolved, we have stuff like bullet hell shooters, for instance. But bullet hell shooters isn't really a genre in the sense that, an arena shooter is a genre different from a military shooter. A bullet hell basically is what we've had all this time, only there's now even more enemies on the screen and even more bullets on the screen. And quite frankly, this quote-unquote evolution is not enough. It's not enough to become something more sophisticated, something that could compete in the modern scene with other independent video games, with other independent platformers or puzzle adventure games and what have you. And Radiant Silvergun would get rid of these limitations, such as, you would actually start off with 7 weapons right from the start. But it's not about collecting weapons to become more powerful. It's about how you use those weapons that makes the game so enjoyable. Each weapon has a strength and a weakness, and when you use a particular weapon, it will be dependent on the scenario. And this aspect of the game actually becomes more enjoyable. Not only there's more variety, but it actually causes the player to think more rather than just rely on muscle memory to hold down the fire button and dodge everything. And but the reason why we don't have games that that were inspired by Radiant Silvergun is simply because Radiant Silvergun was released on a console that wasn't very successful, the Sega Saturn. And it was only released in Japan. So not even American Sega Saturn owners knew about the game. And as a result, over time, as other genres would evolve, the vertical shooter genre would kind of stay in place and would not evolve. At least not all that much, enough to really make a dent in the gaming world. Falconet is a twin-stick shooter, but it takes that design philosophy of Radiant Silvergun, starting with multiple weapons right from the beginning, so that the fun can begin immediately, as opposed to starting with a pea shooter, where the first few minutes of a game is just tedious. And also, the weapons are very circumstantial, so it's not this sort of hierarchy system where this weapon is more powerful than that weapon and so on. It's all about which weapon is best for what situation. And it requires the player to think about, how to play the game and not just, again, rely on muscle memory. This actually ends up being a lot more fun. Now, a lot of it really is just based on Radiant Silvergun, the design philosophy of Falconet, but fortunately, there have been other games that have confirmed multiple times that this sort of design philosophy does really work, and it is something that the masses do really enjoy. In fact, there's, it's software. They've made 2 games like that. Well, actually more than 2 games, but I want to focus on 2 games. That's Quake 3 Arena and Doom Eternal. So Doom Eternal and Quake 3 Arena focus on having weapons that it's not just about using your favorite weapon, it's about using the weapon at the right time. And so you have to always think about which weapon is best to use. And this actually might sound frustrating, but it ends up being more enjoyable. In fact, the guys at id Software have basically taken this design philosophy and, given it a name, which they like to refer to as the fun zone. So Doom Eternal forces the player to be in this fun zone, because the thing about human beings is that we like to do things that are the easiest, not necessarily the things that are the most fun. So if using the super shotgun is easier than switching between like the Gauss cannon and the chain gun, then we're just going to keep using the super shotgun. And they realized that, the super shotgun was, people were too reliant on the super shotgun. The super shotgun has its purposes, has its uses, but they realize that they have to limit the amount of ammo that the player can have, because in Doom 1 and Doom 2, the max amount of shells that you could hold would be 100. In Doom 2016, the max was 60, but the max in Doom Eternal was only 24. A lot of people, however, have been really frustrated with this design philosophy because they feel like that the game is forcing them to play a certain way instead of just letting them play the way they want to play. And this is exactly why Doom 1 and Doom 2 is still probably more popular among Doom fans, because it still has that sort of potential fun zone where people switch between weapons depending on the situation that they're in. But if they want to, they can just stick with the chain gun or stick with the super shotgun or the plasma gun, and they won't be punished for doing so. But I think that instead of limiting ammo to force people to be in that fun zone, I think that the answer to this problem really does lie in Radiant Silvergun. Radiant Silvergun doesn't have a ammo limit. You have infinite ammo. So how do they encourage players to switch between different weapons? Simple. They have enemies that are sometimes immune to certain weapons. So it forces the player to switch it up, to change to a different weapon, and to see what works. Now, some people might think that reminds me a lot of Mega Man, but Mega Man is an extremely punishing game. It punishes you for experimenting, because if you decide to use a weapon against a boss, for instance, that actually is very ineffective, then you basically waste resources and waste your life while you're experimenting with all these different weapons before you can finally figure out what's the best weapon to take out the boss. This is not what Radiant Silvergun did. This is not what Falconet will do. The game will not only encourage experimentation, but it will reward the player for experimentation. And so that's why the alpha build is really just focusing on just this aspect of the design of this game, so that we can make sure that the foundation works well before we start building the walls and the ceiling, so to speak. The alpha build isn't even a quarter of what the game would be like, what your average level would actually play like. We're hoping that people will see the potential here, that having 4 weapons right from the start encourages players to not only experiment with the weapons, but to not be punished for using the quote-unquote wrong weapon. But we also like to sort of design it in such a way that it's pretty obvious as to what the weapons do and where their strengths lie. So, for instance, in the case of the railgun, it goes through all the enemies, but it doesn't go through walls. The beam goes through walls, but the beam is the weakest weapon of the lot. And you have the blaster, which is a nice balance, but it doesn't go through enemies. But you do have the torpedo, which has a blast radius, so enemies can be destroyed because of splash damage, which means that you have not just one option to defeat the enemies that are sitting on top of the buildings, because the rail and the blaster is useless against them. You could use the beam, and that totally works, but you could also use the torpedo because the splash damage will still reach them, will still affect them, assuming that they're not too far away from the edge of the building. So that's just one example. We do not yet have multiple enemies. We literally only have one enemy, but again, we wanted to make sure that the most important aspect of the game, and that is how the player vehicle works. And if it works well, then we can go from there, and we can move on from the foundation and start building some walls and roofs and stuff. And we hope that you guys will play the alpha build and share it with your friends, and also share this video so that people can see the potential here. There's still so much other stuff that we're going to add to this game, but we just wanted to make sure that the most important aspect of it plays really well, and then we can go from there.